Welcome back to another episode of life advice that you do not hear in church. My name is Tiffany Dawn, and hit subscribe to see more videos like this. So a few months ago, it was 3 months ago, I got this message from a friend of mine who is a man. So to all you brave gentlemen out there who join us each week, shout out to you. Your numbers are continually growing. My friend wrote me this message. Tiffany, first of all, I've been watching your videos, so I have a question. How do you know if you're compatible? For example, I think if both people are Christian and are really honoring God and love each other, they can make basically any relationship work. But if you're two polar opposites and have a really hard time understanding the other person and it causes a lot of bickering, is that really God's best? So like, what's a big deal and what's not? And how much compatibility should couples have? And like my friend said, I heard in church all the time, just find another Christian, you both love God, you can make anything work. And to some extent, that's true. There are certainly exceptions to that, but do you want to just make anything work? Because I wouldn't. That sounds awful. Marriage is long and it can be hard, and I wanted to be with someone who I loved being with, and I'm so grateful that I married James and not the other guys I dated, because I feel like we are so compatible. So I have 5 thoughts for you today about compatibility, and I would love to hear additional thoughts from you guys in the comments below. Number 1, compatibility does not always mean what we think. When I hear about compatibility in church circles, I hear about it as in, what's your vocation and your ministry? Where do you see yourself? How do you want to honor God? Like if one person wants to be a missionary and one doesn't, that's not going to work. So I would be careful with this. It's a good thing to keep in mind. Like if you are set and determined, you want to live on the other side of the world and the other person never wants to live away from their family, yeah, that's something you would definitely need to figure out before you went any further in a dating relationship. But these dreams can change. I am living proof of that, and so is my husband. I really thought I would be living in Asia my entire life. I never expected to own a house. I never expected to be living 10 minutes from where I grew up. These things were not on my radar or in my plan, and they are exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. I really believe that. I love being where I am, but it's not what I always thought. And so when I used to look at potential spouses, I would focus too much on what do you want out of life instead of who are you, how do we work together, and do I want to share life with you no matter where it takes us. Thought number 2 is you want it to feel pretty natural. That doesn't mean you always get along or you never fight. In fact, if you never disagree, if there's never tension you have to work through, I would actually take that as a red flag, because every couple is made up of 2 individual people, and if you're both being honest about where you're coming from, that will lead to disagreements. They don't have to be fighting matches. They can be healthy disagreements, but it should lead to some form of, we disagree on this issue, we got to figure out how to handle that. But if it feels like you're always disagreeing, you're always butting heads, you're running uphill trying to make and force this relationship to work, that is a sign in my mind that maybe there's not compatibility there, or perhaps one of you has some traumatic stuff in their past from growing up or past relationships that person needs to work through in therapy. But if you're working too hard at a relationship and trying to make it happen, take that as a sign to step back and think, like, is this really working? I think relationships should feel natural, like you're growing together naturally. It can be slow, there can be hard spots and hard times, but you want it to feel this is natural. Like we're not running uphill, fighting against the odds to make this happen, even though it feels like it's just not working. You want it to feel like this comes kind of naturally. That's what I was looking for, and that's what I found in James, and that was a huge green light for me in our relationship. Thought number 3 is compatibility does not mean you have to agree on everything, but it does mean you respect the other person even when you disagree. So one of the big things we hear in churches is don't be unequally yoked. You need to share the same faith and background. Okay, I get a ton of questions about this, even just like denominations. Like, my girlfriend's from this denomination, I'm from this one, is that gonna work? I hear this all the time. The thing is, compatibility does not equal agreement. James and I have a lot of things that we disagree on, sometimes politically, sometimes theologically. We both came from different denominational backgrounds, and you're gonna have to work through any, those differences you have, but they're normal because you're both your own individual, unique person. I feel like with James and I, we come at it from this approach of we respect each other and where the other person's coming from. And so when we have disagreements, which we do, many times, at the end of the day, like, I'm able to hear a different point of view than what I've always thought. And so is he, and we're able to like work things together. So did it make finding a church hard? Sure. But you kind of, you compromise, you figure out like what works for both of you. Now, do you want to share some core values too? Absolutely. Like the deepest, most core value for me is like, I'm all in for like loving God and loving others. That is what I want more than everything. And that affects everything. That affects the way I live my life. That affects the way I raise my kids. That affects the way I spend my money, you know? And I wanted someone who got that about me, who shared that with me. It didn't mean that he had to express his faith the same way as I do. James is a much more intellectual person in his faith. I'm much more emotional, but we both are like, I'm all in. I want this to affect every part of my life, every decision we make, that we love God and love others. And so that was really important for me to find someone who shared that core value. By the way, I would highly recommend the course I created called Before the Ring. You can read it at any stage in dating or even singleness, and it just talks through 25 questions to ask to figure out if you and your boyfriend or girlfriend are compatible, if you guys work well together and are in a healthy relationship. Do we have the stuff that's important to not just survive a marriage, but to enjoy and thrive in it? So check that out. It's called Before the Ring and it's linked down below. Thought number 4 is compatibility involves compromise. Like I was saying, both of you are different, unique people. You both bring beautiful things to the equation. And in life, there are gonna be so many little things that you guys think differently on, things that you never even expected someone to think differently on, like household chores, roles in a marriage. A lot of times people have these subconscious expectations that they've never thought twice about because it's just what they grew up with. But you don't want either of you to feel like you're just surrendering who you are and trying to become a different person for your boyfriend or girlfriend, because that's not healthy either. You want to be yourself, but realize like compromise is okay and healthy as well. And the final thing I'll say about compatibility, number 5, is that you want both people to be responsible. I get nervous when I see couples who one person is way more mature than the other. And that doesn't mean you can't be silly. Like my dad is a huge goofball. My mom is more serious. That's okay. They like lighten each other up. But what I'm saying is like, if one person is really careful with money and really wise and responsible with it, and the other person is like spending outside their means and has all this credit card debt and not making any moves to change and is in denial that there's even an issue, like that's a huge red flag. Like you want both people to be adults. You want them to be responsible. You want them to know how to conduct themselves in the world. Now, there are gonna be things each of you will have to learn, but in those moments where you're like, we need to talk about money right now, like watch how each other responds. Like, can you share that in love instead of coming across as attacking the other person? And can the other person hear that and say, I need to think about this, and maybe I'll get some help on this, and we can start working toward it together. So it's not like either of you have to be fully mature or fully arrived, but you want to be in process of getting there. Another example of this is even with video games, honestly. Like if somebody spends all day long doing video games and isn't contributing to household, tasks and chores, but that's like what their life is outside of work, that's also a big warning sign. And there's nothing wrong with playing video games. A lot of people love it as a way to de-stress, but if it takes over your whole life and you're addicted to that and you're not being an adult and letting your responsibilities slide, that's a huge warning sign too. So you want both people to be growing into adults. So I hope that those 5 things can help as you're thinking about compatibility. Comment below, what other thoughts do you guys want to add about compatibility? Can't wait to hear. Love you all, and you brave gentlemen. Bye.